In spring of 2021, I worked as a cocktail waitress at a casino. Nothing to really brag about, but I did in fact make pretty good money, especially if the customers were winning. But none of that mattered at this time, because where I lived, the casinos were not allowed to be open because of COVID. I was stuck at home, still receiving unemployment, but only a fraction of what I was used to making. The free time was great, but I'd prefer to actually be earning my money. Because of all this, I was at home alone during the day while my husband worked construction. Most of my days were uneventful, except for one day, and the reason that I'm writing this. I lived in a fairly standard neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it beat the apartments I was used to living in. Most of the residents were typically older, but there were a handful of people my age. I would say about half of us were in a neighborhood Facebook group, an extremely useful tool that I will admit I spent too much time on. I think being online a bunch is what happened to most people during COVID. At around 3 o'clock one afternoon, there was a post in the neighborhood group about a sketchy door-to-door salesman saying he was really pushy and aggressive. There actually have been a number of posts just like this before. For some reason, our neighborhood was ripe for solicitors. And I'm not even sure if this is true, but I've always assumed that all door-to-door salesmen have just gotten out of prison ever since I saw the movie Office Space. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then just consider me paranoid. Anyways, must have only been 20 minutes since I seen the post that there was now a knock at my door. Hindsight, I probably shouldn't have answered it, but I did. A typical looking salesman he was not. Baggy jeans and a dirty oversized t-shirt, not to mention all the neck tattoos. But that wasn't the biggest giveaway. To me, it was the eyes. Hard to explain what I felt when I looked into them, but there was a sense of emptiness, no character or emotion behind them, like staring in the eyes of a child's old doll. Being very disturbed by this, I stood there stoic like a statue, listening to his sales pitch. Halfway through his spiel, I realized what he's trying to sell. I was in disbelief for a moment because 1, there was no way someone would buy this, and 2, this seemed like a front for some premeditated nefarious plan. He was holding a spray bottle with no label on it, telling me it was a window cleaner. He sprays my window next to the front door to demonstrate. He then uses the t-shirt that he's wearing to wipe it off. This has passed weird and is now getting scary. I'm thinking of something to say to get him to go away without making him angry. He then moves the creep level up another notch. He says the window cleaner is organic with no chemicals. He looks directly at me, sticks out his tongue with a large barbell piercing of some sort, and sprays the window cleaner in his mouth. This guy is clearly unstable and could be capable of anything. I really didn't know what my next move was. I just blurted out, "I'll go ask my husband." I shut and locked the door. I surprised myself by being so quick on my feet, knowing my husband wouldn't be home for another 3 hours. That lie came out so naturally that he even believed it. I went up to my bedroom on the second floor to peek out the blinds, watching him walk away. I felt a huge sigh of relief, but only for a moment. Before I could post anything to the group, I see him walking up to the house across the street from me. I didn't know exactly who lived there, but the only person I ever saw was a lady in her 70s that didn't seem to be in great health. I'm a little concerned at this moment. I wouldn't trust this guy as far as I can throw him, but he hasn't broken any laws yet. As I'm watching through my bedroom window, he knocks on her door. I whisper to myself, "Don't answer the door, don't answer the door." She opens the door. I can't hear what they're saying, but they were talking for about 20 seconds. And then it happens. He barges his way into her house as she's trying to close the door. He shoves her to the ground and the door slams shut behind them. Oh my God, this is really happening. Forget the Facebook group. My hands are shaking as I'm dialing 911. As I'm talking to the operator, I make my way downstairs and out the front door. I'm now in the street on the phone with 911, indecisive if I should try to help the lady or not. I have no fighting skills and a 120-pound female. I wouldn't stand a chance, but neither would she, I thought. On the phone with the operator, I mentioned possibly going into the house to help. They direct me not to, but was I supposed to wait 10 minutes or so until police arrived? I'm still standing in the middle of the street, torn between my safety and the helpless old lady's safety. By fate, luck, or whatever you want to call it, the real hero in this story arrives. His name is Luke. He works security at my casino, lives 1 block over from me, and just so happened to be walking his son home from school. I quickly alert him to what's going on. He wastes no time and tells me to stay with his son and runs towards the house. He opens the door. We see the old lady on the ground in pain and fear. She directs him to her bedroom, where the guy is rummaging through her belongings, trying to find something of value to steal. Luke heads to the bedroom. I couldn't see exactly what took place, but I've seen him subdue drunken men at the casino before with ease. Being 6'4", 280 pounds helps with that. Moments later, police arrive. I tell them there are 2 men in there, and the big one is the good guy. Luke had the guy on the ground, unable to move, making it easy for the officers to cuff him. I will never forget when police escorted him out of the house and the look on his face. People often throw the term sociopath around, but I think that is true in this case. A cold, blank gaze with seemingly no life behind it. The remorse and empathy of an inanimate object. A man that never thinks about consequences is a man to fear. Since that day, Luke's family and my family have been invited over for dinner at Helen's place. I formally met her after this incident and finally knew what my neighbor's name was. She only suffered some bruises, thankfully. No broken bones. Even with Facebook to help connect neighbors, nothing beats meeting and speaking with them in person. Whenever I speak with Helen, and she brings up that day, she wells up in tears, expressing how grateful she is to have such great neighbors. And as for window cleaner Crook, he did have a criminal record, and for this incident, he was sentenced to 5.5 years. A 30-year-old female here, and a mother to a 1-year-old boy, my one and only child, and I would do anything I can for him. Besides all the essentials, I take him on walks a lot in the stroller, even multiple times a day. I would always take him on a walk the same route in my neighborhood. It was a perfect 3/4 of a mile loop, bringing me right back home. Each time during the day, I would pass this house that had these big windows facing the street and curtains pulled back. A huge clear view for me into the home. Every single day, I would look into the house, and every time, there would be a woman sitting in a rocking chair, blankly staring out the window. Honestly, the first few times I saw her, she scared me. I would nervously look straight forward and continue with my walk. But one day, I decided to not ignore her. And this time, when I walked by the house, I stopped in front of the window and waved at her. When I did this, the scary woman in the walking chair suddenly had a huge smile on her face and waved back at me. Something I was not expecting at all. She seemed to light up with joy when I did this, that I now smiled and waved at her every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. I did this so much that it seemed like she was staring out the window, waiting for me to walk by and say hi. Soon, her husband would come to the window and wave as well. Another week goes by, and her husband comes out of the house to greet me. I'm really not the social type, but I pretended. His name was Daniel, wife's name was Jill, and the reason she was always in the chair was because she had MS. She can't move around well, and he basically became her caretaker, and he wanted to let me know that she looks forward to seeing me walk by the house with my son. I was very humbled. Daniel and I talked for a little while, and then I continued on my walk. That very same night, my son was having trouble going to sleep. Usually a car ride puts him to sleep, but then he always wakes up when I take him out of the seat, so I thought I'd take him on a walk instead. Even during the day, he would sometimes fall asleep on the walk. When loading him up in the stroller, I grew concerned. I don't live in a bad neighborhood, but I have heard of people getting their cars broken into, and it was 2 in the morning at this time, so I put some pepper spray in my jacket pocket. Taking the same route as always, I was approaching Daniel's house. I noticed up ahead there was someone else on a walk. Appeared to be a man in a hoodie, walking in the opposite direction as me, but on different sides of the street. I wasn't worried about it until he started to cross the street over to my side. I'm now in front of Daniel's house. By habit, I look over to the window. It's completely dark. I can't see anything. Now the man is standing in front of me, and he approaches me, and he says, "Excuse me, do you know what time it is?" I knew he didn't care what time it was. He begins to make his way towards me. My hands are on the handle of the stroller. I'm frozen. I was afraid to move. He leans in close to me, and I can still remember his disgusting foul breath, and says something to me that gives me goosebumps to this day. He says in a creepy whisper in my ear, "Do you want to have another baby?" I'm disgusted and terrified from what he wants to do. But just then, I hear the front door to Daniel's house open. It's Daniel. He yells, "Get the hell away from her." That brief moment gave me a burst of courage to reach into my pocket and pepper spray the hell out of the guy. I unloaded on him directly in his eye. I pushed the stroller out of the cloud of toxins. While the guy is on the ground in agony, Daniel comes out with one running kick directly to his face. Knocks him out cold. He wasn't even screaming from the pepper spray anymore. He took a nap right there. I called for police with my cell phone on me, and they showed up in 3 minutes. The guy came to once they arrested him, but didn't seem to know what was going on. When I felt the threat was over, I gave Daniel the biggest hug of my life and started bawling my eyes out. I literally met this guy only 8 hours ago, and he might have just saved my life, and possibly my son's life, and I truly believe this because police found a knife on the guy. Unfortunately, the guy was only sentenced to 6 months. Frustrating, I know. I was told his sentence wasn't longer because Daniel and I handled him before he could commit a more serious crime, and I'd rather that be the case than him doing what he wanted with me. I still walk by Daniel and Jill's house during the day and wave. I truly have wondered if I had never waved to them, would the outcome would have been different? Daniel said he sometimes sleeps on the couch, and he just so happened to get up to use the restroom, and when he came back, that's when he saw me. Certainly a lot of coincidences that day. I tell people, I was saved because of a simple gesture of kindness. A couple of years ago, there were some really strange things happening in my neighborhood. I had already been here for 12 years now, and nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. This is until this new family moved in. It was a wife, husband, and one kid, a 9-year-old boy. This kid was a true extension of his parents. He seemed not just mean, but somewhat disturbed. I'm not just guessing. My son was also 9 years old at the time, and they were in the same class together. My son told me that he didn't talk to anyone. He mostly sat in the corner and would draw violent cartoons, pictures of bloody knives and guns. Apparently, my kid said one of his drawings was of the teacher with her head cut off. I never had a conversation with the parents. They seemed even more antisocial than their son. They equipped their house with a dozen cameras, which is fine, I guess. Maybe a little excessive, but whatever. But what was creepy about it was in their living room window, facing the street, curtains were closed, but there was a big screen TV facing the outside with a live feed of all the cameras around the house. I found it extremely odd that they would do that. Kind of felt like a scare tactic. Nobody was going to bother them anyway, with the multiple keep out private property signs in their front yard. 3 months after they moved in, I noticed Janice, an elderly woman, posting some signs up in the neighborhood. It was of her cat that had gone missing. I used to see Janice's cat all the time. It was mostly an outdoors cat, and it hung around the block doing its own thing, and eventually would make its way back home when it was hungry or when it was raining. It kind of felt like our own neighborhood cat. It wasn't afraid of people, very friendly. There were actually a few cats I've seen roaming around like that. They usually always made their way home when they wanted to, It was never a problem, but it was now, and Janice was worried. I figured eventually the cat would show up, but it never did. 2 weeks after I saw the flyer for Janice's cat, there was another flyer put up for another missing cat. A week after that, a third cat goes missing. I thought 1 cat, okay, 2, maybe, but 3 missing in 3 weeks? Something's going on here. The entire time living here, I didn't hear of any people's pets going missing, and it's not like we live in an area where there's bobcats or any other animals that would eat them. Eventually, 6 months pass, and none of the cats were found. One morning when leaving for work, I see a for sale sign next to all their no trespassing signs. I figured, good, they can go be weird somewhere else. On the for sale sign was a picture of the realtor. It was a former co-worker of mine, Gary. We weren't great friends or anything, but I wondered if he found them as weird as I did. When arriving home that day, I saw Gary putting up a pending sign. That was quick, I thought. I walked over to catch up with him. After talking about old times at work together, I asked about the family moving. His facial expression told me he thought they were as odd as I did. Gary said they actually had vacated the home already. That blew my mind because you would think I would see a moving truck or something. The most disturbing part is what Gary said next. In the basement, there was a strong odor of cat urine, along with dark stains that looked like blood. I shouted, "They must be the catnappers." I told Gary the backstory. I asked him if I could have a look around the place. No problem, he said. I headed straight to the basement. Gary said he tried his best to get rid of the urine smell, but I could faintly smell it. Gary was creeped out when I told him they didn't have any pets, at least that I saw. It was hard to tell if the dark stain was blood or not on the concrete basement floor, but it was eerie down there. I toured the rest of the house, and surprisingly, it was immaculate. The place was spotless, felt brand new. I went into the backyard. It was a small yard with a 4-foot fence aligning the property. Beyond the property is a huge field that was vacant and owned by the city. I thought that would be cool to have, basically a free second backyard. I took a stroll along the fence, and something caught my eye. Off of the property, just beyond the fence, looked to be an area that had been disturbed. A hole that was dug, with dirt covering it up. I looked closer, and I saw a bone. I stepped over the fence and kicked the dirt around, and just underneath, I saw the skull of a cat. This can't be real, I thought. I called Gary over. He was freaked out. I dug a little deeper with my hands and discovered a second cat skull. Holy hell. How deep was this grave, I thought. I walked to my work truck and grabbed my shovel. After 15 minutes of completely digging it all up, Gary and I counted 8 cat skulls and bodies. Gary and I both agreed we should call the police. We explained everything to the officers, but they didn't seem like it was slam dunk evidence like we thought. They explained to us that it was just circumstantial evidence at this point. Plus, the bones weren't actually located on their property. All they could do was question them about it. I was really let down by this, because all they had to do was say, "No, we didn't do it." And that's exactly what they did. And they were never charged with anything. I don't know if it was the best decision, but I chose not to tell Janice or anyone else about what I found. I figured I would only do more harm by telling an old lady that her missing cat was most likely tortured and killed by a sadistic family. Or maybe it was just the son. I don't know. When they moved, my son informed me that the kid no longer goes to his school. That was a relief to me, because if a 9-year-old actually did something like this, it's only going to get worse when they're older.